HP Lion Tamer PT-10. Daphne awoke very early on Saturday morning. She had hardly slept during the night as her mind refused to stop imagining horrific scenes of Harry rejecting her apology for everything that had happened. In her heart she knew that she was not to blame for her behavior, but she still felt trepidation at having to apologize. The fact of the matter was that she still knew very little about Harry, and she wasn't sure if he would forgive her. She realized that getting any more sleep was going to be impossible, and got up to make herself presentable. Her plan was to grab Harry before he could enter the Great Hall and explain what had happened, and why she'd been acting so abrasively. If he still refused to forgive her, Daphne was not above begging. She showered, dressed, and spent a little extra time on her hair and makeup, doing her best to look as irresistible to Harry as she could manage. She then started heading up to wait for her destiny. As she was leaving her dorm, Daphne swore she heard Tracy whisper good luck. She reached the empty entrance hall, and found a place where she could easily see Harry when he came down to breakfast. She had no idea how long she would have to wait, and wished she could hurry time along so that she could fix everything with Harry. She was not as confident as Tracy or Astoria had been the previous evening about things working out. In fact, she would not have been surprised if Harry refused to even listen to her. She'd been so cold towards him. Knowing that it wasn't her fault did not seem to help the situation at all. She was lost in her thoughts when she saw something that gave her pause. Professor Dumbledore coming in out of the cold. He was wearing a heavy traveling cloak, and looked rather tired. Daphne thought it strange that the headmaster should be awake so early, and outside, on such a cold morning. Yet, from all the stories and rumors she'd heard of the man, Daphne was actually surprised she found the man's behavior so strange. It is most unusual to see any student awake and about this early on a Saturday morning, Miss Greengrass. Is everything all right? He asked kindly as he got close to her. I'm waiting for Harry. I need to fix things between us. That stuff that Draco used on me. Ah, yes. Miss Parkinson made it abundantly clear that Mr. Malfoy was behind it all, though he refuses to tell me where he procured the potion. Professor Snape believes it to be a very rare recipe. Nevertheless, Mr. Malfoy had been suitably punished for his actions. May I ask? Daphne began. He will be receiving detentions with Professor McGonagall for the rest of the year. He has also been removed from the Quidditch team, and has been stripped of his prefect status, as has Miss Parkinson. That's better than I thought would happen, Daphne said. She blushed furiously when she realized she had said it aloud. Who are the prefects going to be now? She said quickly, changing subjects. Professor Snape will be making the announcement later today. If I may offer some advice, regarding Mr. Potter. Honesty, Miss Greengrass. Mr. Potter can forgive much, so long as you remain forthright with him. Daphne looked questioningly at the headmaster, who simply smiled as he made his way into the Great Hall. Daphne knew that the headmaster was trying to be helpful, but something about his advice seemed to trigger some kind of warning bell. The fact was, she'd almost always been honest with Harry. Sure, there was the fact that she had helped Hermione more or less trick him into teaching the defense club, which was finally going to have its first meeting this week. And yes, there was that one other omission regarding the contract that they had made everyone sign, but other than those two instances, she'd been very straight with Harry about everything. So why would the headmaster urge her to be honest? Little by little, the student body of Hogwarts began to awaken and trickle into the Great Hall to feast on sausages, bacon, eggs, fruit, or whatever else the house elves had prepared. Many students eyed her as they entered the Great Hall, most of them being girls, who Daphne was sure were waiting for their chance to steal Harry away from her. The worst was from Cho Chang, who looked ready to strangle the Slytherin girl as she passed. The smells wafting out of the Great Hall made her stomach ache with longing. But Daphne remained rooted to her spot, awaiting the appearance of her estranged boyfriend. She didn't believe she could eat a single bite, even though her stomach was obviously telling her the opposite. Finally, after nearly 3 hours of waiting, she saw him. Harry was with Ron, and the two looked to be discussing what Daphne guessed was likely Quidditch related. Daphne couldn't help a small smile as the two boys descended the stairs. Though Harry had not admitted it to her, she knew that he missed Ron. There was a bond between them that had suffered heavily because of Ron's paranoia. Watching them now, it looked as if everything was in the past, though she knew that looks were deceiving. Harry had said that the two may never be as close as they once were, and that if not for his growing friendship with Ron, Harry would have been truly heartbroken over it. As the two boys stepped off the staircase, Daphne pounced, grabbing Harry by the arm and dragging him away from Ron and the Great Hall. She led the raven-haired boy down a corridor and found an empty classroom, shutting the door behind after she forcibly pushed Harry through. The look on his face broke her heart. He looked so hurt, and dejected, and Daphne felt herself beginning to shake with anger at Draco for everything he'd caused. She could still feel the effects of the potion in her system, but they were far weaker than they'd been the day before. For that, she was endlessly thankful. She hoped in just a few more days, she'd feel normal again. Thought about it, have you? Ready to toss me aside? Harry asked, pain evident in his eyes. Don't think you're going to get rid of me, Harry. Daphne said, feeling her eyes beginning to sting. I know you've been wondering what's been going on with me, and I have to tell you that I wasn't even sure. One day I woke up, and the thought of you made me feel strangely irritated. Like someone had thrown a switch in my brain. To make matters worse, I was fighting against myself, because my heart wanted nothing more than to be with you all the time. Last night, I found out exactly what was happening with me, or rather to me. Harry's pained expression began to melt into one of curious interest. I was being drugged, for lack of a better word. By Draco. What? Harry's curiosity was burned away by his intense anger. He started for the door when Daphne grabbed him. Please, just wait. We can deal with him later. Right now, you and I have to fix this. Harry, I was so awful to you. Harry turned to look at her. He felt horrible when he saw tears brimming in her dark brown eyes. Why didn't you try to tell me how you were feeling? He asked. Because it would have made things worse. Gods, Harry, I was so miserable. I wanted to be with you, to have you hold me and kiss me, and be like a normal couple, like we had been, but just the sight of you made me so angry and bitter. I know I should have been suspicious when Draco started trying to be like my best friend, but I was so wrapped up in trying to figure out what was wrong with us. And there was nothing wrong. Was there? Harry asked, feeling concerned. No. You've been better than perfect. Most guys would just want to spend all our time in a broom cupboard trying to get into my knickers, but not you. You actually want to spend time with me and have conversations, and share with me. With you it isn't just physical, it's deeper, and it's something I cherish more than anything, and it's something I don't ever want to give up. Harry, I love you. Her words made him feel strange. She loved him. She really loved him. His heart beat faster at her revelation, and he felt lightheaded. Could that be what he had been feeling all this time? Whenever they were together, and he felt like he could conquer any challenge. or how he felt complete though he had no idea he'd been missing something in his life. Was that why these past 2 weeks had been so damned painful for him? Because he loved her, and was so afraid of losing her. I don't know what to say. Harry stammered as he stared into her tearful eyes. She stepped closer to him, taking both his hands in hers. Harry felt her trembling, and wanted to comfort her. "You don't need to say anything until you're ready to," she said, her voice low. "To be honest, I only really puzzled it all out myself last night, and I had Tracy and Astoria helping me. By the way, I think letting Tori learn football was a good idea. She kicked Draco in the shin, and I don't think he'll be walking right for a while. That's nothing compared to what I'm going to do to him." Harry snarled, feeling his anger rising again. "No. We'll do it together," Daphne said firmly. "He did this to both of us. Beating him to a pulp won't get us justice." "Well, neither will detention with Snape." Harry frowned. "He's not doing detention with Snape. He's doing it with McGonagall. And, he's been removed from the Quidditch team and he's no longer a prefect." Daphne smiled softly. "How do you know all this?" "I have my ways." She grinned. "I saw Professor Dumbledore this morning." "I'll tell you everything later." "Right now?" I really want to." She wasn't able to finish her thought. Harry bent down and captured her lips with his own. Daphne melted into his embrace, and 2 weeks of frustration and confusion seemed to vanish as they reconnected. The kiss was one of the most intense Daphne could remember. Even their first kiss paled ever so slightly in comparison. Daphne wondered later on if it was because she understood what he meant to her now. She loved him with all her heart. And she knew, by the way he held her and kissed her, that even though he'd not said the words, Harry Potter loved her in return. A short while later, Harry and Daphne were heading into the Great Hall. Arm in arm, when they were met by Draco and his group of thugs. Daphne noticed that Pansy was with them, though she looked beaten. Her head was hung low, and she was standing behind all of the boys. Well, well. I see no matter how I try to help, you're just far too attracted to trash, green grass." Draco sneered. "Just what exactly were you trying to accomplish, Malfoy?" Harry growled angrily. Daphne tightened her grip on his arm to keep him from attacking his rival. "I couldn't live with myself if I didn't attempt to make green grass see that you're beneath her, Potter. Face it, you're dangerous to be around. People get hurt because of you, and you know it. I mean, for Merlin's sake, Diggory died because of you. You rotten little." Harry lunged, but Daphne pulled him back. "No, Harry. He's just trying to goad you. The truth is, he thought the only way to get me in his bed was to use a potion on me. It wouldn't have worked, even if I hadn't found out what he was doing. And why is that, green grass? Come on, Draco, everyone in Slytherin knows about your problem. Your performance problem." Harry's eyes went wide as he realized what Daphne was hinting at. Draco's eyes went to slits and his face reddened. It got worse as Crabbe, Goyle, and Not all snickered. Pansy went white as a sheet, and kept her eyes on the floor. Daphne simply stood before the blonde defiantly. "You little whore!" Draco hissed, his wand suddenly in his hand. "I'll make you pay for that insult." "I don't think so, Malfoy," Harry said, his wand already pointed directly between Draco's eyes. "Just give me a reason, you bigoted little ponce. Are you threatening me, Potter?" Draco's face was stony, his eyes cold slits. "Are you daring to challenge me?" "Draco, there would be no challenge. I'm giving you only one warning. If I even think you're looking at me or my friends wrong, I'll put you in a world of hurt. Empty threats, Potter. You haven't got the guts to back it up. Try me. Dip Indo. Draco called out. Harry had been waiting for it, knowing that Draco was just waiting for the right moment. Harry easily slid out of the way before Draco had finished taking in a breath to cast the spell. Expelliarmus. Harry tried to grip his wand as it sailed out of his hand right into the pudgy toad-like paws of Dolores Umbridge. I see I got here just in time. She looked quite distraught. I fear if I had been a moment later, well, thank goodness I came when I did. Mr. Potter, I'm afraid your behavior is inexcusable. Detention will not be enough this time. I'm afraid you will have to start packing. What? Harry and Daphne shouted. I will not allow such violent behavior stand. Umbridge smiled. But he attacked Harry first. Daphne shouted. Miss Greengrass is correct, Professor. Dumbledore said plaintively as he appeared at Harry's side. I do believe Harry was not only defending himself against Mr. Malfoy's attack, but Miss Greengrass as well. Professor Dumbledore, forgive me, but you were not here. And did not see. Oh, but I was, Professor. In fact, I was just about to intervene. It seems my reflexes are not what they once were. Again, I thank you for stepping in. Mr. Malfoy, we will need to add to your detentions, I believe, and I think 50 points from Slytherin. Now, as there is nothing more to discuss, I believe Mr. Potter and Miss Greengrass have yet to have breakfast. Off you go then. Harry held out his hand to take back his wand, and noticed how reluctant Umbridge was to give it back to him. Finally she slapped it in his hand rather forcefully, and Harry turned his back and escorted Daphne into the Great Hall. Draco and his friends all left as well, leaving the Headmaster and the High Inquisitor. I have the right to overturn punishments, Albus. Yes. You and the Minister are working quite diligently to push me out of my position. However, you have not yet managed, and in your haste, you have overlooked quite a few details, including the need to present a case to the school governors before expelling a student. You may consider that in your next educational decree. Umbridge was left seething as Dumbledore stepped by her. Heading to his private quarters. It was very late that evening when Severus Snape knocked on the door to the headmaster's office. He entered the office after he had been bade to enter. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his stone basin pensieve sitting upon the desk in front of him. I take it your trip was successful? Snape said, taking a seat across from the headmaster. Indeed. It proved quite fruitful. Though I am regretful. The little creature hung to life so desperately, as if she knew I would be coming to see her one day. Dumbledore said sadly. So, have you finally completed your puzzle? Or is this just another piece? Snape asked, motioning to the pensieve. Another piece, I am afraid, but a very important one. It has shown me 2 items I believe that Lord Voldemort used, thought I still have no idea where he has hidden them. The boy is getting stronger. It seems that he finally understands. So long as he practices in between our lessons. I feel he should be ready by the end of the year. That is too long to wait. Dumbledore shook his head. Why not keep him at headquarters during the summer? Then you can teach him without interruption. I'm sure the Mud would have no objections. Snape smiled at his own joke. Dumbledore simply glared at the potions master. Severus, it is my greatest hope that one day you will give up this petty grudge. It has been nearly 25 years. As for your suggestion, you know why Harry must return to his relatives. Ah yes, the blood wards. Snape snickered. The same wards that became all but useless when the Dark Lord took the boy's blood. The same wards that have been steadily weakening over the last 10 years because the key element has been missing. Dumbledore's face soured at Snape's words. As much as he hated it, the headmaster knew his potions professor was correct. Had Petunia Dursley cared for Harry as much as she cared for her own son, things may have been very different. Yet, Dumbledore still held hope that the wards he placed so much faith in would keep Harry safe for just a bit longer. He had few other options left to him. Professor Umbridge is trying to press her power, Dumbledore said, changing topics. This morning she tried to have Harry expelled. This cannot be allowed. I will need you and Minerva to look after him, and protect him. If she manages to succeed, we shall have far more problems. You still expect to be sacked. I think it is only a matter of time. Cornelius is becoming more and more desperate in his conviction. As I understand it, he has been having some difficulties with some of our foreign dignitaries. They all believe he is trying too hard to cover something up, and are becoming rather suspicious. Rather stupid of Fudge. We are in agreement. Had he but accepted the truth, we might have been able to acquire assistance, or even found sanctuary for those hit hardest by the coming conflict. Now, we will be forced to face this alone. Dumbledore sat back in his seat, staring into the swirling silvery substance in the stone basin before him. He had collected so many pieces of the puzzle in the last 10 years, and still he felt no closer to putting it all together. His suspicions had been confirmed by Harry himself 3 years ago, when the 12-year-old presented a destroyed diary. Ad told the tale of what he had faced deep under Hogwarts. He still had a few more people to track down, and it was his greatest hope that he would finally get all the answers he sought, and be able to track down and destroy every single one of the Dark Lord's Horcruxes, and ready young Harry Potter for the eventual confrontation. Neither can live while the other survives, he thought to himself. Not that I'm complaining. Harry smiled as Daphne pressed her mouth against his in yet another fiery kiss that Harry could feel in the tips of his toes. But I have forgiven you, you don't need to try and apologize anymore. I know. Daphne grinned as she captured her boyfriend's lips again. I'm not apologizing anymore. What exactly are you doing then? Making up for lost time. I have 2 weeks of snogging owed to me. She giggled as she kissed him again. Harry. Please tell me that isn't your mirror. Daphne sighed, her lips barely brushing Harry's hair. Harry sighed. And Daphne extracted herself from Harry's embrace so he could get to his mirror, where Sirius' face was waiting. Where are you? Why's it so dark? Sirius asked, though Harry guessed his godfather already knew. Can I help you, Sirius? Harry said, not bothering to hide his ire. Is that the lovely Miss Greengrass with you? It has been far too long, my dear. Sirius grinned. Hello again, Sirius. Daphne smiled politely, though she felt much the same as Harry at the moment. Am I interrupting something? Perhaps a. What do you want, you mutt? Harry demanded. Testy. Well then, right to the point. I got word that you nearly got expelled. Umbridge caught me and Draco fighting. I didn't even cast a spell, though Draco got one off. She completely ignored him, and went right after me. It's true. Draco threatened me, and Harry stepped in. He only had his wand in his hand. Daphne said. She looked very sour. Look, Harry, I know you don't want to hear this, especially after everything else, but you need to keep your head down. That woman is trying to get more power. Soon, she'll be able to override Dumbledore's decisions, and anyone who opposes her will find themselves in serious trouble. Have you started your defense club yet? This week will be our first meeting. Harry said, his tone becoming excited. And you've got some place to meet that you won't be discovered. Oh yeah. Dobby helped us find it? It's wicked. Good. Be careful, Harry. Contact me if you need anything, and I'll see to it you get what you need. How are your lessons with Snape going? Sirius's countenance grew a bit darker. I think I've finally grasped the concept. I haven't had a single nightmare since our last lesson. Harry proclaimed proudly. Just remember what I told you. The better you get, the harder Snape's going to push you. It'll weaken you for a bit, but you'll get stronger for it. Listen to him, as much as I hate to admit it, there is no one better to teach you. I will. Have you found out why it's so important I learn all this? I've tried to ask Dumbledore, but he just keeps saying it's important, but he won't say why. I have a feeling he'll tell you when he thinks you're ready. Have you heard from Victor yet? I got a letter earlier this week. He says it's all arranged. Fleur also got hold of a few people, and Hermione says she's got someone here in England who will write a story. Harry said. Daphne looked at him oddly. She couldn't help the guilt that crept up inside her, as she'd forgotten that Harry was arranging to tell his story to some reporters. She wanted to be there at his side to support him and was thankful that she had not missed the opportunity because of Draco's meddling. Good. Let me know when it happens. In the meantime, keep your head down. The last thing you need is to be tossed into Azkaban. Good night, Harry, Daphne. Good night, Sirius. Harry smiled while Daphne merely waved. Harry returned the mirror to his pocket and turned to face Daphne, who looked very depressed. I'm sorry, Harry. I know it wasn't my fault, but I can't help feeling bad for everything. I want to be there for you when you talk to those reporters. If I had missed that because of Daphne. It's over, and you haven't missed a thing. What's important is that you found out what was happening on before something happened that we couldn't fix. Malfoy's the one to blame here, not you. It won't do anybody any good if we dwell on what might have happened. I know. And I swear I'm going to get that little bastard. He's going to pay for everything. Daphne said, melting into Harry's embrace. I think we should just unleash Historia on him. Harry, that's too cruel, even for Malfoy. Daphne shook her head. Images of her little sister tormenting the Slytherin prince in ways far too disturbing to utter aloud. It seemed like it had taken an eternity. There had been every kind of delay imaginable. But finally, Harry was standing before a group of students, who had placed their trust that he would teach them defensive magic. In truth, Harry had so much more in mind. Apologies to you all for taking so long. Harry started as soon as the last student arrived in the room of requirement. Harry. Harry turned to see Hermione looking sort of pensive. I think we should do a few things first, and get them out of the way, she said. Harry shrugged and let her take center stage. Right. I think we should vote on who the leader of our little club is, just so there's no arguments later. Are you barking? Fred shouted. Yeah, Harry's our leader. George pointed out. There was a murmur of agreement, to which Hermione simply nodded. I agree as well, but we should just make it official. Is there anyone who is opposed to Harry being the official leader of this group? No one said a word, nor made any move to contend. Hermione waited a few moments, watching everyone before she gave a small smile. Right, then. It's official, Harry is our leader. Now, I think that we should have some kind of name for our club, for lack of a better word. The Defense League. Someone shouted. The Ministry of Magic are morons group. Fred laughed. The Anti-Umbridge Brigade. Several more names were shouted out, none of which were very flattering to the Ministry or Umbridge. It seemed the Weasleys, all four of them present, were masterminds on the matter of naming the club, yet none of them really stuck. And it was starting to get a bit out of hand when Hermione cleared her throat. "Enough," Hermione said loudly. Harry was trying to stifle his laughter, as Hermione regained control of the situation. She gave Harry a glare before continuing. "I was actually thinking of something that didn't advertise what we were doing, so that we might talk about it outside of this room. Why not call it the Defense Association?" Cho Chang said proudly, staring directly at Harry. "We can call it the DA for short. No one will know what it means that way." "If we're going to call it the DA, why not make it stand for Dumbledore's Army?" Ginny Weasley asked. "I mean, Fudge already thinks that's what's going on here." There was more murmuring as the group contemplated the suggestion. Cho looked a bit upset that her idea had been twisted, but she didn't seem to mind how it had been changed either. "All right," Hermione said. "Dumbledore's Army it is." Hermione went back to sit next to Neville, who was smiling quite proudly at his girlfriend. Harry stepped up in front of everyone again and all conversation stopped. "All right, I thought for tonight I'd give you all a rundown of what I have planned. Then, I thought we'd work on disarming spells." "Disarming spells?" Zachariah Smith looked incredulous. "We already know that. But, can you perform it perfectly every time you cast it?" Harry asked. "Can you disarm an opponent every single time you use it?" "The best way to beat your opponent is to make sure he can't cast a spell." "But, Zach's right," Ernie Macmillan said. "We all know that spell. I thought you'd be teaching us, like, advanced stuff." "Everyone, clear the floor," Harry sighed. "Ernie, you and Zach stay there." Harry was staring both Zacharias and Ernie down as the rest of the group split. "Since you both seem to have the spell down, disarm me then." Ernie looked to Zacharias, who looked just as nervous as Ernie felt. Both of them drew their wands, just as Harry pulled his own wand out. "Expelliarmus," Ernie said, casting the disarming spell. Harry slipped to the left, avoiding the spell and casting one of his own. Ernie watched helplessly as his wand was torn from his hand and sailed right into Harry's. Before anyone could blink, Harry had done the same to Zacharias. "You cannot hesitate. You can't spend time thinking about what you're going to do. You can't ask your opponent to stand still. You need to be able to cast without thinking. One spell may be all that keeps you alive, and it might end up being the most simple spell you know." Harry tossed the boys back their wands as he turned to address the rest of the room. "Defense isn't about how many spells you have in your arsenal. It's about surprising your enemy. Keep them off balance, don't be predictable. And I don't mean just with magic. We're all going to be learning how to fight like muggles. We're going to be learning how to use weapons. Death Eaters rely on magic, we shouldn't. I'm not saying that it will work, but the more we know, the better chance we have at staying alive, or protecting people we love." Harry was looking at Daphne as he said this. The Slytherin girl nodded at him, a look of understanding on her face. Harry looked at each and every face, each of them mulling over his words. "This isn't about grades, or tests. It's about staying alive. Do not be fooled by the Ministry. Voldemort is alive." There was a wave of shuddering and Harry shook his head angrily. "Sooner or later he's going to be coming for all of us." Harry allowed for the silence to hang for a moment so his words could sink in. He then got everyone to pair off and begin disarming each other, while he walked around the room helping people. He was surprised at how bad many of them were at the spell. In fact, Other than Hermione, only Fred, George, and Luna Lovegood appeared to be fairly proficient. Harry. Harry turned to find Cho Chang standing behind him. I can't seem to get it. Could you help? Daphne. Millicent called. Daphne tore her eyes away from where Harry was helping Cho with her casting. I'm waiting for you to try. Sorry, Millie. Daphne said. She tried to cast the spell and missed entirely. Her mind was clouded with bitter irritation at the Asian girl, who was obviously trying to flirt with Harry. She hadn't forgotten all the trouble she had caused Harry when she'd kissed him in the first week. Expelliarmus. Daphne felt her wand fly out of her hand, and she was forcibly brought back into reality as Millicent shouted with delight. Not only had she managed to disarm Daphne, but had caught her wand as well. Great job, Daphne said as she took her wand back. You shouldn't worry, Millie said, patting Daphne's shoulder. I see how he looks at you. Like you're the only girl in the whole world. Don't worry until you actually have something to worry about. Daphne had to smile. She watched as Harry gave Cho a pat on the shoulder and turned to help Dennis Creevy, who was partnered with her younger sister. Daphne noticed the way Astoria looked very nervous next to the Gryffindor second year. Not to get nosy, but do you think your sister has a thing for that scrawny kid? Millie asked, a smirk on her face. What can I say? Daphne grinned. We green grass girls like our men scrawny and sweet. Come on. I believe it's my turn. Harry kept them at it for 3 hours when Hermione noticed the time. Harry allowed everyone to leave in pairs, watching the Marauders map carefully to make sure no teacher was near the room of requirement. As it was so late, Harry was denied the privilege of walking Daphne back to her common room. There was no way, even with every secret passages he knew, and the Marauders map in his hand, that he would make it back to his own common room before curfew. Though he was more than willing to risk it. No, Harry. Daphne said firmly as she finished kissing him goodnight. I intend to keep you out of trouble, and if that means I have to walk myself to my common room, then so be it. Don't worry, Harry. Astoria grinned. I'll see to it she gets back okay. See. Daphne grinned. I have an escort. I'll see you tomorrow. Fine. Harry conceded. Next time, I'll make sure we end earlier. You'd better not. This was really good. Astoria said firmly. Why? Because you are now able to disarm someone, or because you spent the entire time with that little blonde boy? Daphne prodded. Astoria's face went a brilliant shade of pink and she made a strange squeaking noise. Without a word, she began tugging her sister out the door before Daphne could utter another word. Harry was left alone with Ron now. They waited a few seconds before they two left the room. It was a really good lesson, mate. And the way you handled Smith and Macmillan. It really made people realize how serious this is. I wasn't trying to embarrass them. Harry shrugged. I just wanted to show them that it could be the easiest. Harry, I get it. Ron cut him off. I'm glad you're doing things this way. I didn't even realize how weak my disarming spell was. By the end of the lesson, I was able to disarm Tracy nearly every time. And Neville, I never thought he could cast that well. And against Hermione. Everyone did really well tonight. Harry smiled. I'm anxious to see how they do with shield charms. The two boys arrived in the Gryffindor common room to be met by a very excited Hermione. Harry, she said as she ran up to her two friends. You'll never believe it. I was looking out the window and I saw. Hermione was practically jumping up and down. Harry looked at Ron, who appeared just as confused. "What are you talking about?" Harry asked. "Hagrid's back," Hermione whispered, her eyes glowing with happiness. Harry turned on his heel and started walking out of Gryffindor Tower. Ron grasped his arm. "Where are you going?" "To see Hagrid," Harry said, tugging his arm out of Ron's hand. "Harry, you can't. It's past curfew now," Hermione said, as if Harry had suddenly lost his mind. "You're right. I'll go get my cloak," Harry said, beginning to head up to the dorm. "Harry, no," Hermione snarled, clutching Harry's shoulders. "I know you've missed him. We all have. But, you can't leave the castle tonight. Filch has got the doors closed for the night by now, and Umbridge is just looking for a reason to get you back in detention. We'll all go see him tomorrow. Listen to us, for once, Harry," Ron said calmly. "I'm just as anxious to see the big guy as you are, but if we go now, and get caught—" Silence fell while Harry thought over everything. He desperately wanted to see Hagrid and find out where his half-giant friend had been all this time. At the same time, he knew Ron and Hermione were trying to keep him safe. He turned to look at them both, each wearing identical looks of pleading on their faces. Slowly, Harry nodded his head. He would wait until the morning to go visit Hagrid. "Draco, a moment, if you please," Professor Umbridge said as her fifth-year class ended. The Slytherins and Ravenclaws were all collecting their books and heading out for their next classes. Daphne spared a glance at her fellow Slytherin and the hated defense teacher, before Tracy tugged her along. "Yes, Professor. I wanted to be the one to tell you that you will no longer be having detention with Professor McGonagall. I have overturned the headmaster's ruling." Umbridge smiled at the blonde, who looked rather puzzled. Thank you, Professor," Draco stuttered. "Yes. I, of course, know you to be innocent. After all, your father is quite an upstanding man." "Absolutely," Draco said, still feeling wary. "I find myself in need of help. I need students who are trustworthy and who believe in discipline and order. This institution of learning has become a mockery of itself, and I intend to restore it to its once proud glory. To do this, I need your help." "My help?" Draco asked, incredulous. "Yes. I am putting together a group of students to help me monitor the school and help to keep order. They must be upstanding students, who can be trusted not to abuse the power they'll have." "And what power is that?" Draco asked, his inquisitiveness getting the better of him. Umbridge smiled. "You will be able to hand out detentions, just like a prefect, but you will also be able to take away and reward house points." Draco's eyebrows rose so high they might have been lost in his hairline. "House points?" "Yes. I will also have other duties for you to perform, as well. I would like you to lead this group." Draco smiled. "I am honored, Professor. Of course, I will be happy to help you clean this school up." "Very good." Umbridge clapped her hands together. "Your first job will be to find more students to help us. No more than 20. Also, I think they should be from prominent families. Pure bloods. I want students who are loyal to the ministry, do you understand?" "I do," Draco said, as he thrust his chest out proudly. "I'll get to work on it right away. Please bring your candidates to me. Together, we shall have this school cleaned up in no time." Draco gave a small bow before leaving his defense teacher. He was shocked at how things had changed so suddenly. He'd only had one detention under McGonagall, and had hated it so much. The way she watched him, so judgmentally. As if she was so much better than he was. She was little more than Dumbledore's stooge. But now, he no longer had to do those detentions, and he'd been given back his prefect status. No, he'd been given something better. He could now take away or reward house points. Prefects couldn't do that. Prefects couldn't give detentions either, they could only report offenses to teachers so they could give detentions. Draco was even more powerful than the head boy and girl. He would have other students looking up to him. It was now very clear to him that Umbridge coming to Hogwarts was the best thing that had ever happened to the institution. Yes, he would help Umbridge. And while he helped the High Inquisitor, he would help himself. Draco had a score to settle, and now it looked like he would have the means to get back at Daphne Greengrass. It was one of the most difficult things he'd ever had to do. Harry could not concentrate on any of his subjects because all he wanted to do was to go and see Hagrid. The half-giant had not been at breakfast, but neither was Professor Grubbly Plank. He didn't have care of magical creatures today, and he did not know anyone who did. Harry's neck was in serious risk of snapping off his head with as much as he kept turning it during lunch, hoping for a glimpse of his first friend in the world. Every time he passed a window that he knew looked out on Hagrid's hut, he checked to see if there was still smoke coming from the chimney. Finally, when classes were finished, Harry, along with Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Daphne all raced down to the half-giant's hut, where Harry began banging loudly on the door. The smile that appeared on his face when he heard Hagrid's great boarhound's loud barks was something Daphne could not remember seeing. He looked like Astoria at Christmas. That smile intensified as they all heard sounds coming from the cabin, and finally the voice of the long-lost groundskeeper. "Out o' the way, you dodgy mongrel." Daphne had only had a few encounters with the Hogwarts groundskeeper, and had found him somewhat oafish. At the same time, she knew him to be a kind and well-meaning man. She had heard stories about the man through Harry, and knew how important Hagrid was to her boyfriend. "I been expectin' you three." Hagrid smiled as he opened the door to his cabin. "Oh, Hagrid," Hermione said, her hands covering her mouth. "What happened to your face?" What little of Hagrid's face that wasn't covered with hair, was a mass of purple and black bruises. His left eye was nearly swollen shut. There were fresh cuts on his face and hands. Hagrid waved off Hermione's concerns. "I'm fine, don't ya worry. Come in, come in." Hagrid waved them all in. "So good ter see yet." The 5 students stepped into Hagrid's hut and took seats. Harry and Daphne shared a chair, while Hermione and Neville took another. Ron had a seat to himself, and Fang immediately laid his head on Ron's lap, his doleful eyes bright as Ron patted the dog's head. "Where've you been, Hagrid?" Harry asked as the mountain of a man bustled about making tea. Hagrid turned and gave a wary look at Daphne and Neville and then shrugged. "I don't know if I should be telling yetha," Hagrid said. "At least not in mixed company." "So sorry," Harry said, shaking his head. "Hagrid, this is Daphne Greengrass. My girlfriend." Hagrid nearly dropped the mugs he was setting on the table. "Girlfriend? Since when have you got a girlfriend, Harry?" "Since nearly the start of the year," Harry said, wrapping an arm around Daphne, who settled her head on his shoulder. She was feeling desperately uncomfortable under the half-giant's gaze. Hagrid appeared to be sizing the girl up for several moments. Daphne noticed both Ron and Hermione watching with bated breath. Daphne herself wondered what Hagrid's judgment might mean for her in Harry's world. "I imagine you've gotten a bit o' trouble for crossing house lines, eh?" Hagrid asked. Daphne gave a weak nod, which Hagrid returned. I don't mean to sound prejudiced or nothing like that, but you Slytherins do tend to stick to your own. If you don't mind my skin, why Harry? Daphne cleared her throat, and sat up. I don't know if there's really one answer to that question, Professor Hagrid. I've liked him for a long time. I had a lot to prove to him when we first started getting to know each other, but while he was getting to know the real me, I got a look at the real Harry, and that's the boy I fell for. Maybe if there weren't houses, there wouldn't be those stupid house lines, and I would have gotten to know Harry much sooner. Hagrid, I trust her as much as I trust everyone else in this room. She's proven to me beyond any doubt that she really cares for me. If I trust her, you can too. Harry said. Hagrid looked over at Hermione, as if he was going to ask a question, when he saw her gripping Neville's hand. You and Neville. The half-giant's beetle black eyes looked as if they might pop out of his head. Yet all grew up while I was away. The half-giant looked to Ron, who was scratching Fang behind his ears, making the dog's back legs twitch. What about ya, Ron? Have ya got yourself a young lady now, too? Ron's face burned crimson, and he shook his head. Not at the moment. Well, not to worry yourself. Your brothers didn't date too much when they were your age, either. In fact, Percy was the only one to have a girlfriend while they were in school. Hagrid, where've you been all this time? Hermione asked, changing the subject to save Ron further embarrassment. Hagrid shook his great head. I already told ya, I can't be telling any of ya. Did you find the giants? Hagrid spun so fast, Harry thought for sure he was going to fall over. How? It was kind of obvious, if you think about it. Ron said, shrugging. Who better to go talk to them than a half-giant? Hagrid looked nervously at them all, lingering on Daphne. Why did it take you so long to get back? Hermione asked. And what happened to you? Did the giants do that to you? Have you been held captive? No. Hagrid said firmly, waving his hands in front of him as if he were swatting at bats. No, nothing like that. Hagrid heaved a great sigh and sat heavily in the only remaining seat that creaked a bit under his weight. Too bloody nosy for ya own good. Hagrid muttered. I've said it 100 times. All right, I'll tell ya, but I'm warning ya all to keep it between ya. Again he eyed Daphne in particular. Hagrid spent the next hour filling them in on his adventures through Europe with Madame Maxime. Harry and the others could tell he was trying to be very vague, but he ended up telling more and more as the youngsters prodded the information out of him. Though he sounded troubled by sharing the story, there was an obvious spark in his eye, that told them all he was quite proud of them. They hung on his every word, as they heard all about his experience trying to open relations with the giants, and the ultimate failure when Death Eaters showed up. You're not telling us everything, Harry accused. Madame Maxime made it back by the start of term. Something else happened, didn't it? Hagrid looked out his window nervously, but shook his head. Nothing ya need to know. Now, tell me about what's been going on around here. Dumbledore was pretty hazy on the topic last night. You saw Dumbledore? Hermione asked, looking confused. Yeah, right after the Umbridge woman informed me she'd be inspecting me classes. Dumbledore told me to beware of her. Said she's working for Fudge. Dumbledore reckoned I should try and keep it simple this year. And he's right. Hermione was out of her seat. She's a horrid woman. Hermione was joined by the others in informing their friend of Umbridge's one-woman crusade against Harry and all the things that had happened since the start of term. Hagrid became truly outraged when he learned of the new defense teacher's detention methods, and demanded to see the scar on Harry's hand. "Did ye not go to another teacher?" "Hagrid." Harry sighed. "It's been made quite clear what will happen to me if I open my mouth. Besides, she's got the minister behind her." Ron snapped. Hagrid shook his great bushy head, muttering about the corruption in the ministry. Harry smiled to Hermione, who was grinning as well. Harry gave his girlfriend a squeeze, and she smiled at him. She knew that she was an outsider in this group, and she could tell from Neville's silence, and his awkward looks that he was feeling just as strange as she was. But at the same time, she felt exhilarated. Harry had wanted her here with him. She had been accepted by the man whose opinion seemed to matter the most to Harry, despite the fact she was from Slytherin House. Daphne knew there was more going on than she knew, and she also knew she was not going to be told everything. She had kept her questions to herself during Hagrid's tale, as she had been frightened of making the half-giant nervous. She didn't like the thought of being kicked out because Hagrid thought she was from a family of Death Eaters. She could tell by his occasional looks of suspicion that even though Harry trusted her, Hagrid was still suspicious. Daphne knew from the beginning that she was going to have to constantly prove herself to people who Harry felt were important. The experience with Ron had proven that. But she knew he was worth it. She loved him, and she would do anything to keep him in her life. Please like and subscribe.